Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 53 called Liz. So guys, on this episode, I am proud to partner with the Oh Hell No podcast, which was created by Kay Nicole, a woman I met at Podfest in Orlando. She and I were in the same speaker group and I loved her immediately. And we went out for happy hour that night and the rest is history. She's amazing and so is her show, which is a podcast for young people transitioning into adult life or adults who are already there and are looking for some motivation in getting to their next level. On the show, she interviews everyday people sharing their real life experiences about finding their passions and living more purpose-driven lives and helping people along the way. So to subscribe to this podcast, click the link in my Linktree or download wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Thanks so much. So before we start with Liz's story, I just want to send some extra love out to this entire community. I know so many of you are going through super hard times right now with cycles being canceled and postponed and just so much heartbreak. And I hope you guys are all hanging in there. I'm here for you. You can always email me at infertileafstories@gmail.com and I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you just want to vent or tell me what's going on with you, I so appreciate this community and how we all lift each other up. So in this insane time when everything feels backwards and upside down, I just want you to know that I am here and I see you and I feel for you. I also want to say that this episode was recorded before all this coronavirus madness was on full tilt. So it's before everybody was quarantined and not really able to travel. So just wanted to mention that because there's a part where she talks about going to see her surrogate in California and you're probably like, what? How is she traveling right now? So this was recorded before all of that. Okay, so back to Liz. So Dr. Elizabeth Kane is the Chief Scientific Officer at NearList, where she heads up product development and research and development. So she helps develop new products and educational content that serve people when they're trying to conceive. So if you haven't checked out NearList, NearList.com, they have a lot of products from pregnancy tests to ovulation kits to vitamins and more. There's also tons of information. It's a female-founded company of doctors and scientists and moms. So, you know, I love all of that, and I'm sure you guys do too. So today, Liz is going to tell us the story of her very complicated first pregnancy and then going through infertility to have her second. So without further ado, this is Liz's infertility story. Hi, Liz. How are you today?
Hi, Ellie. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for doing this. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about how you went through infertility and then you ended up co-founding NearList, which is an awesome company that's helping in the infertility space. So we'll get into all that, but let's just start at the beginning for you. So where did you grow up and did you always want to have children?
Yeah. So I grew up right outside of New York City, and I don't think I really knew that I always wanted to have kids. I actually was kind of on the fence even when I was in my mid-20s, and then I got married at 27. I had to do the math in my head there for a second. And we were married for a couple years, and then we decided to start trying. And I got pregnant actually fairly easily and quickly with my first Hazel. It took us about 3 months. And then we actually had a bunch of complications when I was pregnant, and I can go into that a little later. But
Sure.
that process was relatively smooth. And then the second one is another story, which we should get into.
Yes.
But that really was the decision to have kids was kind of like a difficult one because I was really invested in my career at the time. And I had to decide, do I put my career a little bit on pause and have a family, which is, I'm sure, something that most women go through, the struggle of can you have it all?
Yes.
And it was really hard. And I ultimately decided that I wanted to have kids, and I didn't want to, compromise on my dreams of having a family. And, I figured I would take a step back from my career. And I was an academic at the time. I ran a research lab at Harvard. And
I've heard of Harvard.
Yeah.
Pretty good school.
It's a little school.
Yeah.
But academia is still really not very friendly to the needs and desires of professors, especially women. I think it's a lot harder on women to decide to want to have a family, and especially if you have any sort of complications during pregnancy and need to take time off. It's really hard if you're running a research laboratory, because you physically have to be in the laboratory really to be managing people in the lab. They're running experiments at the bench, and if you're not at the bench to help them, it's hard. I had to really make that decision, and it was absolutely the right decision, but at the time it was a really overwhelming decision.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because we actually don't talk about that super often on the podcast, but I am curious about what you said of, having to leave work or kind of make a decision between the two. Tell me a little bit more about that. So if you had left, or you decided to, do you kind of lose all the traction that you had kind of gotten up until that point? Like, is it, and then you kind of have to start, back a few steps backwards if you come back into it?
It was interesting. I remember at the time I spoke to one of my academic mentors, and I went and talked to her, and I said, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Can I come back if I decide to take some time off to have a family? And she was basically like very diplomatically said no.
Wow.
She was like, this is a one-way door. If you decide to take time off and walk out, you don't really get to come back.
Wow.
And I think, maybe times have changed. It's been 6 years since I made that decision. But I think, for me, that was definitely true. It's really hard in academia if you decide and you're on like a professor track that you want to leave. And this was the case for me. Maybe for other people it's different, but I couldn't really go back to the place where I was in my career. You can come back to a different spot. You can want to be, a junior professor. You can come back to be an adjunct professor. You can come back to be, a different position. But the place that I was, I couldn't go back to it. That was a step that I could never come back.
Wow. So was it ultimately a really difficult decision to make?
Yeah, it was super hard. I really deliberated over it. I was really stressed for that entire year, I think, when I was going through that decision. And because I have some health complications, I knew that I was going to need to take some time off. I have really severe chronic migraines, and I knew that I was going to have to come off one of my migraine medications to actually try to conceive, because it wasn't safe during pregnancy. And I knew my migraines were going to get worse, and I wouldn't be able to work when I was pregnant because of my migraines. And so not only was it me just saying like, hey, I'm not going to, I'm going to be pregnant, but also I'm not going to be able to work while I'm pregnant. So I knew I was going to have to take time off. And that was a really difficult decision. And also just to say like, hey, I'm going to feel really sick for, at least 10 months plus the time that I was going to try to conceive. So that was also a very overwhelming decision to make.
Right. So this was the decision with your first kid before you even had the infertility stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So
just with my first kid. So even just trying to get pregnant the decision to get pregnant the first time around was a complicated one, and involved lots of doctors, like going to my neurologist to wean off medication, going to my OBGYN, just coordinating care between the both of them and planning. So I remember feeling like, hey, talking to my friends, we're just like, hey, we just randomly decided we're going to have sex one night and we got pregnant. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been planning to get pregnant with my first kid for like 6 months.
Right. It had to be such a calculated decision for you. That's so interesting. So
it was very calculated.
So what happened once you finally did get pregnant?
It was pretty rough. So I ended up having really severe morning sickness, and my headaches got very severe. My migraines got pretty severe, because I was off one of my medications that I take to prevent them. After that, I ended up, being moderately okay in the second trimester. And then in the third trimester, I ended up getting cholestasis, which is one of these rare complications where you don't, I think the way it is you should ask an OBGYN to be completely accurate, but you have the buildup of bile acids that can't be properly metabolized. And so it's one of these conditions where it's associated with a higher risk of stillbirth after 36 weeks. So, and it's also just really uncomfortable. So like one of the hallmarks of this is that you're incredibly itchy on your hands and feet. And it's just like, it's a weird thing that you normally don't think of.
Yes. That sounds terrible.
It was really, So about like 32 weeks, I was just like incredibly, incredibly itchy, like to the point where you like, you wakes you up at night, you know, you can't go to sleep. It's just really torturous. And you're just also so nervous because you're like, oh my God, this is dangerous for your child. So I ended up having to get induced right at 36 weeks because that's like the standard of care for people with cholestasis. And my induction didn't go very smoothly. So I ended up actually getting a uterine infection during labor. And luckily Hazel, my daughter, was fine, but we both, I ended up having a very high fever, and I actually had a complex migraine in labor. So they were worried about me neurologically if I was going to be okay. It was very painful. And then I actually ended up having a postpartum hemorrhage 3 weeks later. So I had to go back in for emergency surgery.
Wow. So what does that entail?
So postpartum hemorrhage is when you just start hemorrhaging, usually from retained placenta that you don't pass during labor. And so that's what happened. I didn't pass out my placenta. And it's more common if you have to deliver early or you have a uterine infection, which I had both. And so I had to have a DNC.
Oh, wow. After birth.
Weeks. Yeah, exactly.
I've never heard of a DNC except for a miscarriage.
Yeah. So I actually had to have one 3 weeks after. And it was pretty scary. I was at home just 3 weeks after with a newborn. And I just started hemorrhaging uncontrollably. And so I had to call my husband and be like, we need to go to the hospital. This is terrifying. And so I had to have an emergency DNC.
Oh, wow.
So I was note to self, my body does not do well with pregnancy.
Right.
Not a good situation for me.
Right.
So it was pretty hard on me. So luckily, Hazel was actually totally fine. I got all the brunt of the damage. She was completely okay, which was, my biggest concern.
Yeah.
She was completely fine.
So then after you had Hazel, how long before you guys started to try again?
It was a while. I wasn't emotionally ready because of how difficult my pregnancy and labor was. So I didn't try again until Hazel was a little over 3. And then we started trying again and things did not go as planned.
Okay. What happened?
I just got pregnant really easily with Hazel and I thought it would be easy the second time around. So
right. And how old were you when you had Hazel?
I was 30.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was 33. 34 the second time I tried to get pregnant again.
Okay.
And, I had to do the same thing, come off my migraine medication. So my headaches also got bad again. And so we tried to conceive and I eventually did get pregnant after trying for a while, but I miscarried.
Sorry. How far along were you?
It was very early. It was 6 weeks. And I was actually very much in denial when I miscarried. I was, the first time when it happened, I called my doctor and they were like, oh, you're having bleeding. And I was like, okay, I think, the clinician, the scientist in me, the part of me that treats everything very analytically was like, okay, I'm miscarrying. I know how this is going to go. It's going to be fine. It hadn't really hit me yet. And so I went to the doctor. They did the ultrasound. They saw the collapsed sac. And I was like, okay, I know how this is going. And then I had plans that night to go out to dinner with my friends. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go. And I went and I was like, okay, now I can have a cocktail.
Yeah.
I was just still so in denial. And so
Right.
I just
That's
like,
so interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it just like hadn't hit me yet. And I just like went out and had a cocktail. And my friends were all like, "Aren't you pregnant? Like, what's going on?" And I
Uh-huh.
was like, "I had a miscarriage. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to have my cocktail and then I'm going to go home."
Yeah.
And I just like, it didn't hit me until like a couple of days later.
Mm-hmm.
I just like wasn't prepared to process it emotionally.
Right. And then when it did hit, how did it hit? What happened?
Yeah, I was just like, it really was just like, I think it didn't hit me until I passed the sac, which if anyone's had a miscarriage, like it's a pretty gruesome thing.
Yeah.
And I just like was really broken down. Like it was just really depressing. It took like, it was a couple of days of me just feeling really depressed and feeling like I had tried really a long time for this thing. Also just like the added difficulty of me feeling like I was off my migraine medications and my body was really just like out of control. My migraines were difficult. I had a hard time getting pregnant. It was just both of those things on top of it were really hard for me. And just like knowing that I don't have control over this process and being upset. And then also just trying to like let that go at the same time. So after that, given that like my migraines were really difficult, we decided to do IVF. So once I like got through that process, I was like, okay, I have a path forward. I'm going to do IVF.
Okay.
And I can go back on my medication to do IVF and then I'm going to be okay.
Okay. So how were you able to go back on your medication to do IVF? Because it was more monitored or like what was?
Yeah. So we decided at that point we were just going to freeze embryos. So to freeze embryos, you actually don't need, it doesn't matter if you're on migraine medication. I actually don't need to have, if you're going to actually like carry a pregnancy.
Pregnant. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I was like, I'm not ready for this. Like, I just want to freeze embryos and I just want to go back on my meds and like then worry about this later. So then I felt like I have a path forward. I'm not ready for this. Like my body was I just felt like my body had betrayed me and I wasn't ready for this process, which I think is probably what like a lot of women go through.
Yes. The body betrayal thing I think is super common. I felt that way too.
Yeah.
And it's like my doctor at one point, I've said this before, but said, actually your body is doing the right thing by getting rid of unhealthy pregnancies. So try not to like be mad at your body because it is doing the right thing. But it's so hard to grapple with both sides of it because you're like,
totally.
And like you're failing to a certain
degree. And I felt like I wasn't really mad so much at like my body for losing a pregnancy. Cause I also agree that like, yes, it was genetically abnormal. That was it's not healthy to carry. I don't want a pregnancy that wasn't going to be viable anyway.
Right.
Like the scientist in me thinking about that, but also it's really disappointing. And I was feeling so sick. And I'm just not ready to like go through this process again.
Right. So had you gone back to work after you had Hazel?
I did, yeah. So
okay.
I started NearList with Hallie right after I had this miscarriage, actually.
Okay. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I'd love to continue on with what happened. So you did that, you started IVF and then what?
Yeah. So we did IVF. IVF actually, was not fun. I'm sure like everyone who's done IVF will probably agree with that.
It's not fun. I would never use that adjective. No, it's not fun.
It's not fun. But I do feel like what was gratifying about IVF is it was a very precise process. It was like go in, like as opposed to being in the phase where you're just, at least for me, I felt like I have a plan. Like every day I do a thing. And then at the end of it, since IVF actually worked and gave me frozen embryos at the end, I'm like, I have these things. Like, I know that, they're embryos, they're genetically tested. Like, I know they're okay, as opposed to being in this like uncontrolled state where I didn't know what was happening.
Yes.
So I felt
the unknown is so hard. Yeah,
exactly. So I felt like, hey, like I have this like ABCD, like one by one process I'm going to get through. And then at the end of it, I'll be okay. But I know for so many women, IVF isn't that for them. And, they just go through it over and over again and it doesn't give them anything. And so I can understand how IVF is also just like a money pit that gives them nothing. So it's just such an individualistic experience. Luckily for me, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But, everyone's different and where they are in this process. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's so many different factors from your doctor to your body, to what's going on health complication wise, to your partner. You know, there's so many factors. Every story is so different.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, for me, it worked. For someone else, probably, you know, totally not. Yeah.
So you guys, tell me about the process.
So we did, you know, the 2-week. I actually couldn't take, I know most women start IVF with birth control, which I always thought was like very ironic.
It's so counterintuitive.
I know. Yeah. I actually had to skip that because of my migraines. I can't take birth control. So I got to skip that part of it. But then I started with, I think it was, what's this called? An estrogen inhibitor. So I did that. And so it's like 5 days of pills. And then after the pills, you move to the shots. And then the shots I started getting really nauseous, which reminded me most of what morning sickness was like when I was pregnant. And then, you know, you move to like the getting very swollen phase and really like, you know, just bloated and uncomfortable. And we did the retrieval and I ended up getting, I think it was 21 eggs. And then from the 21 eggs, I think 15 of them fertilized. From the 15 that fertilized, 6 of them grew to day 5 blastocysts, which is, you know, the point at which you could implant. And then we actually did genetic testing on them. And the 6 of the 6, only 3 of them were genetically normal.
Okay. How did you feel about that? And
I felt like I only wanted to have one more kid. So as long as I got at least one of them, I was happy. So I was really grateful that I got 3.
Okay.
And the scientist in me.
I was just going to say, was the scientist in you? I was just going to use those exact words. Was the scientist in you? Go ahead, because you're probably going to say what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So I looked at the stats and what is like they're all graded, right? So you can look up what the embryo grading is for a particular embryo. And I knew my embryos were graded from 5AA and 6AA. So there's a relationship between the embryo grading and the likelihood of viability if you implant.
Right.
And that's true for everyone. And then even if my embryos were graded really highly. So I was like, this is great. Like I got 3 highly graded embryos. And then if you genetically test them, it's actually even more likely that they'll be viable if you do an implant. So I was like, even better. Like I got 3, and then I was like, okay, I feel like I'm in a good place. I have 3 of them. Like the odds are that one of these will work, and hopefully I won't have to do this again.
Can I interject and just say, in terms of the grading, just to put this out there, you know, every lab is different, right? It sounds like I had the same kind of situation that you did because I had 6AA and that same kind of rating, but I've talked to other people who've had different ratings. So just if anyone's listening, every lab's different. So don't compare your ratings to others, right? Just so that people listening might be like, oh my God, I had a QR. Like, what does that mean? You know?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It depends on the lab.
Weird. Okay. Yeah. Good to know. Yeah. So that's how ours were graded.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely ask your REI or the embryologist there how their rating were. And they'll give you like little pictures, which was also really cool.
Yeah. Okay. So then did you have to wait to do a transfer or was it fresh, frozen? How did you guys?
Yeah. So we ultimately decided at the end of the day, this was like also a really difficult journey for me. So after we did we froze the embryos, and then I was like, I'm not ready to do a transfer. Like I'm not in a place mentally where I feel like I can actually carry a pregnancy given my migraines and how difficult it was for me. And just as someone with a chronic illness, it's really difficult to say, hey, am I in a place where I feel like I'm healthy enough to carry a pregnancy given all of the medication that I'm currently on for my migraines? Right. And you also have to decide, okay, and I had all this previous complications when I was pregnant, right? Like I had cholestasis, I had a uterine infection when I was in labor, then I had a postpartum hemorrhage. And on top of that, I had to deal with medication for migraine management.
Wow.
So yeah. So I had a lot of medical issues going on.
Just a couple things going on.
Exactly. And I just wasn't ready at that time, given that I had then struggled for a long time to try and get pregnant. And then I had a miscarriage and I just wasn't in a good place. So I was like, we're going to freeze our embryos. I'm going to come back to this when I'm in a good place mentally. And I feel like I can take this on. because, I was signing up for weaning off migraine medication, having potentially, 10 months of headaches and, looking at this list of complications again when it was time to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband and I talked it over for a long time. And we ultimately decided that it would be best if we decided to pursue surrogacy for our second child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did. So we have a wonderful, wonderful surrogate. Her name is Danielle.
Mm-hmm.
And we are expecting actually our second child now. We have a second child that's going to be a girl, which is luckily what you get to find out when you do PGS test,
Right.
the pre-implantation genetic screening. They'll tell you if you're going to have a boy or a girl.
Yes.
Even before you implant your embryo, which is crazy. So yeah, we knew we were going to have a girl, and we had a transfer back, 5 or 6 months ago at this point. And so we're due in May of this year, and we're really excited to have our second child.
That's so wonderful. So tell me, let's back up just a little bit. Tell me about the surrogacy process for you. How did you find the woman that you ultimately ended up with?
Yeah, so we use an agency, and we love our agency. They're called Building Families, and they helped us find Danielle. So Danielle's in California.
Okay, so tell me about the logistics of that.
Yeah, so we picked Building Families, and they only have surrogates in California because they're local in California. And the legality of surrogacy, as you know, is state by state regulated. So in California, you can obtain something called a pre-birth order, which means that the parent names, the intended parent names, so my name and my husband's name, will go on the birth certificate after the baby's born.
Right.
And there's only a few states in the U.S. where that can happen. Mm-hmm. So it depends on if you want that to happen, if you don't want that to happen. Sometimes, I forget what states this is, but in other states, you will have to essentially file for an adoption after your child is born, something kind of like an adoption.
Right. It gets really complicated.
Yeah. And I'm not an expert on this. What I just said could have been wrong. You should definitely talk to someone who specializes in family law. But when we spoke to friends of ours who have also gone the surrogacy route, they recommended that we find an agency who is in one of these states where you can get this pre-birth order.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
So that was why we chose to go to California.
Right. And so you said the baby's due in May?
Yeah.
Okay. So how has it been? And have you been able to she's in California still, right? So have you been able to FaceTime appointments or go out there, or what's your involvement?
Have. Yeah, we've done both. So Danielle's been awesome. She FaceTimes in us for every appointment. That's, a big one. We flew out to California for the 20-week anatomy scan so we could be there, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. And I was seeing just between when I was pregnant with Hazel and the second baby, ultrasounds have gotten so much better. We got to see so much more detail than I got to see when I was pregnant with Hazel.
Isn't it crazy how every year, I feel like when I was pregnant with my now 10-year-old, it was a pencil sketch. They would put a piece of paper and drew on a sketch.
I know. My
quill and ink.
Totally. My mom showed me her ultrasound of me, and I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. This looks like a TV static. There's no baby here.
Yes. So I don't even know if they had ultrasounds when I was born in 1974. Did they even have them?
I have no idea.
I know my mom smoked cigarettes while she was pregnant with me. So that has changed.
Yeah. It's changed a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mom, I love you though.
Yeah. You turned out okay. It's
I turned out okay. Yeah. So, all right. So tell me about, that's so exciting. First of all, that this is happening, and congratulations. And
thank you.
I'm such a fan of surrogates. And I just think it's the greatest gift that, women can give. So
we do too. I mean, Danielle is an angel to us.
Yeah.
We just love her so much. And she's going to be so precious to us for the rest of our lives.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody says they've become family members. So that's one of the misconceptions, the people that don't want to legalize surrogacy in New York. They're, people that I met with in Albany were like, well, there's always the question of who's the parent? And we were like, no, that's not the question. It's never the question. The surrogate knows they don't want to be the parent. They're not the parent, so there's this antiquated notion behind it.
Yeah. But, we've never, ever has that even been an issue.
Right.
I mean, Danielle is, wonderful. She knows exactly, what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about NearList. So you started this business, and you can tell me in your own words what it is, because you'll say it better than me.
Yeah. So NearList is a women-led company that seeks to provide products and resources for families trying to conceive.
Yay. I
Um,
love female founded companies.
yeah, we do too. And, it really was born out of Hallie and mine and our third co-founder, Dr. Nas, our struggles and our own experiences trying to have our own children.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through this process and we just, we're really left uninspired with the products and education that was out there. And we really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to change it for the better.
Mm-hmm. So how did it all begin?
It began, Hallie really recruited all of us together. I mean, Hallie was the main force and she was like, we're going to do this. And we're like, okay, sign us up. And Hallie started a fundraise. Then we decided we would, be based in Charleston. And shortly after that, we just started, getting to the drawing board and we're like, what are the first things we're going to make? What's our website's going to be? And we were like, we need to make pregnancy tests, ovulation tests, prenatal vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
We need to write a book about what it's like to try to get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're like, and we need to, make them easily available to the consumer online because that's where everyone wants to buy these products.
Exactly.
I buy everything online.
Same.
Amazon is my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was the beginning. And it took us about a year to get there.
Okay. And so what do you offer that's different? Like take a pregnancy test, for example. What are you doing that is different?
Yeah. So what was a really important differentiator for us is that we wanted our pregnancy test to be incredibly easy to use, easy to read, and come with directions and packaging that don't feel like they were designed in the 1980s. And so we tried to revamp the entire usability and the whole experience for the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And we really feel like it's a totally different experience. The tests are clean and sleek. The instructions have very clear. They're not full of medical jargon. They're written to you like it's from your best friend. If your best friend was a doctor.
Right. Dare I say they're kind of chic too. They're like a chic pregnancy test.
Exactly. Yeah. We want them to feel like they could be at home in your beautiful bathroom.
Right.
On your shelf looking, just as cute as like a beautiful candle.
Right.
So that's really where we wanted it to feel different.
Mm-hmm.
And every, pregnancy tests, ovulation tests, these are all FDA regulated products. So they're just as effective as just as accurate as everything else on the market.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're all fairly standardized in that way. So we want to make sure that, you don't ever compromise on accuracy, that what we're really giving you is a better experience.
Right.
And, they're more beautiful.
Right. And so what about a price point? Did you guys, I'm sure you considered that and you want to make it better for women as well. I've spent, oh my God, so much money on pregnancy tests when I was trying. You're just hemorrhaging for lack, sorry, bad word, but
no, it's totally fine.
The money is insane.
I know. I always joke that I've never peed on so much money in my life. But
seriously, I might as well have been peeing on $20 bills.
Totally. Exactly. That was really important to us too. And the other thing we felt, at least this was the case when I was pregnant, trying to get pregnant, this was how I felt is you need more tests than come in a box. Like you buy a pack of one or two and you want to test every day. Like you're like, how close can I get to when I can actually test?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like you can test 5 days before your period and you're like, when exactly am I going to get my period? Like you don't really always know down to the precise day.
Right.
So we wanted to give women more tests per box and bring the price point down.
Right.
And so we did do that. So we're actually going to be in Target in April.
What?
In a select number of stores. Yeah, really
That's
exciting.
huge.
I know. And so you're going to get, right now, we have 3 tests in a box. In Target, you'll be able to get 4 tests in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get, you can pee on 4 tests. So you're not exactly sure when your period's coming. That's fine. You have 4 tests. You'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important. And per test, we're cheaper than everyone else on the shelf. Yeah.
Okay. And I love also you have this Get Pregnant bundle, which is the pregnancy test, ovulation test, prenatal multivitamins, and omega DHA. So it's all packed in together. And I feel like you're just really tapping into something that hasn't been done.
It has been great. We are growing rapidly. It's a really fun time for us. We're just trying to meet our customers wherever they are. If you want to buy us online, you can find us online. If you're in a store, we've all had that moment where like, oh my God, I need to test right now. So you can go find us in a store,
Awesome.
So we want to be wherever you want to find us.
Okay, awesome. And you'll keep us posted on the babe.
Yes, I would be happy to.
Hey again, guys. Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Liz. And Liz, thank you so much for not only sharing your story, but for creating NearList, which is an amazing company. You guys are doing great things. So I hope you all are able to check it out. So I also wanted to say again that I really feel for everybody who's going through a rough time right now. We all are struggling in different ways. So let's just remember to be kind and lift each other up. And if you guys are bored and you need a project, you can always go over to the Infertile AF podcast page and give it a little review, which I would really appreciate if you haven't done that yet, and a rating. Anyway, thank you so much, and I will talk to you guys next time.